it's really appreciated that the attendees, the panelists are here, and also members of the media who may have received this information that we were going to have this opportunity to analyze the data from this program that was extended to small businesses around the country. I want to begin by introducing the people who are here with you. We have Domingo Garcia. He is the LULAC National President. Domingo, welcome. Above him, we have also Cindy Benavides. She is the National Chief Executive Officer. Then we have Ramiro Cavazos. He is the President and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber. Juan Proaño is President and CEO of Latino Strategies. He will do the data analysis. Then we have two witnesses. This is Alicia Ponce. She is the LULAC Business Chair, and she is also the founder and principal of AB Monarch architectural firm. Then we have Carolina Sanchez Crozier. She is LULAC Illinois and National Education Chair. I welcome you all. President Garcia, if you would begin.
Yes, the COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on the Latino community, not only health-wise, which where we're seeing with large, for example, the city of New York, where Latino fatalities are the largest of the ethnic groups there, followed very closely by the African-American community, but that's happening across the board. And that showed some of the health disparities that we are seeing in America today. But also it's having an economic consequence. And that is impacting every mom and pop Latino and Latina business across America, from Los Angeles to New York to Miami to Dallas, San Antonio, and Middle America. And what we're seeing today is that the stimulus bill that was passed, that was supposed to help these small businesses, in fact, did not. In fact, what we saw was government money being given to Fortune 500 companies and being given to Wall Street. And in the Main Street and in the barrio, that money just did not get there. And we are making demands today on the Small Business Administration, on the White House, and on Congress that we need to make sure that we save the motor of America, which are the small businesses, many of them started by immigrants who have that spirit of the Statue of Liberty and what America stands for, that American dream in them. And what we saw in this last stimulus was the banks totally failed them. And we saw banks, large banks like Bank of America that was saved in 2008 by government handouts, by the way. And we saw a company at Wells Fargo that had zero in our survey that will be out in terms of Latino families or businesses that were helped. And this is just redlining in a different form. And it is putting Latino and Latina businesses at risk and all their employees. And we are demanding that the government take action. We are asking that $50 billion be set aside specifically for minority-owned businesses to help all those businesses that are in danger right now and all their employees. If we do business the same way we did in 2008, if we do business the same way we did just 3 or 4 weeks ago with the stimulus package, all the money will continue to go to Wall Street billionaires and Fortune 500 companies, and the people who need it most, those small businesses that make America grow and move forward, will be left out again. So we will show you the numbers, but we believe clearly that the American government is failing small businesses throughout America, especially Latino and Latina small businesses.
Thank you, President Garcia. We'll turn it over to Cindy Benavides. She is the National Chief Executive Officer of LULAC.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you as well to Ramiro Cavazos with the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for joining us. I wanted to highlight that, again, as mentioned by President Garcia, Latinos are being disproportionately impacted. We already know that there is a massive undercount when it comes to testing of the Latino community. And as President Garcia mentioned, in New York City alone, of the fatalities, 34% are directly in the Latino community. We also know that as we look at the data that is coming out, whether it's in the Midwest or whether it's in Rhode Island or even here in my own backyard of Fairfax County, Virginia, where 40% of COVID cases are in the Latino community. It's important to note that, again, we feel that there is a massive undercount that is occurring, but especially when we look at small businesses and those in particular that are Latino owned, we know, according to a JP Morgan Chase Institute report, that minority businesses already have less cash on hand than other businesses. In fact, many of them have fewer than 21 days of cash. What does that mean for our community? That means that at least 50% of Latino businesses will be out of business before we see any direct impact by the federal government. I think it's also important to highlight that as Latino businesses are being left out, completely ignored from accessing capital, that this further increases and highlights the disparities that exist in all of our country when it comes to Latinos and when it comes to other communities of color. And our call to action is directly with the federal government. We are also asking all the banks to prioritize small businesses and put our small businesses that have less than 50 employees, less than 20 employees at the top of the list as a priority, especially as the funding from the fourth package is given out. With that, David, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Cindy Benavides, CEO of LULAC. We turn now to the President and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber, Mr. Ramiro Cavazos. Ramiro.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz, and thank you, President Garcia and CEO Benavides, for your advocacy every day on behalf of our Latino community. We stand in solidarity with you at the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to say that the research that's been gathered by Juan Proano and his team, and also want to commend Carolyn and Alicia, who are small business owners, as examples of the fact that the data shows that Latinos and Latinas have not received their fair share of the program, the protection money, the PPP. It's our feeling that during the first round, it's very clear the data shows of the loans reviewed and approved, there were 74% of the total applicants that were approved were for businesses that were extremely small, 150,000 and below, in loans that they were seeking to cover their employees, their workforce, and of course their utilities and costs. And yet, of that 74%, which was 3 out of every 4 loans reviewed and approved, only 15% of the actual dollars of the $350 billion to the Paycheck Protection Program went to that high percentage of small business owners, and that shows the tremendous need in our community. It's very clear that our businesses, the 4.5 million Hispanic-owned businesses that we represent, the 60 million Latinos whose voice LULAC and the U.S. Hispanic Chamber is fighting for, are being left out and shut out. In fact, even though today the president signed an additional amount of $310 billion, we know there are 1.7 million loan applicants waiting that are in the queue, and that money is going to go immediately again. And our concern is that I agree with President Garcia that we need to have our pro rata share go to the Latino community. We are, in many instances, do not have a banking relationship. 1 out of every 2 of our businesses are micro businesses, employ people or employ themselves, but they're the lifeblood of this economy, and they are also the future of the economy for this country. And we don't need to lose those businesses, because if we do, we'll lose them permanently. We're also very concerned that the 8 weeks is not a sufficient time frame in which to provide a forgivable loan. It's very clear that as we move forward with this COVID-19 crisis, that it is not flipping a switch by just throwing money out there into the community. We're going to have to turn the dial slowly and reintegrate our businesses and do it wisely. But that liquidity that Ms. Benavides mentioned that is needed within the next 30-day period of available reserves for these businesses, that in many instances, they don't have those reserves. We're already 6 weeks into this crisis, and we're already late, and we're also not serving the population that is out there on the front line. So I want to thank LULAC for its leadership and and Mr. Peruano for the research. And we're very honored to be here with you to advocate for more Latino and Latino-owned businesses to get their fair share of these dollars.
Thank you, President Cavazos. And let me say a little bit later, we will have remarks in Spanish as well. I'd like to turn it over now to the data analysis expert. This is Juan Peruano. He is President and CEO of Latino Strategies. And if I may, Juan, you take it away. All right, Juan, you're on.
You're muted. Juan, you're muted.
I think that's being controlled by Jorge. I'm not sure.
Can you hear me now?
There it is. Yes.
Excellent. Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. So can everyone see my screen here? I have a couple slides that I wanted to walk everyone through.
Yes.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So as President Garcia and Cindy mentioned, LULAC continues to advocate on behalf of Latinos relative to the impact of COVID-19. A lot of that impact is now also seeping into an economic disenfranchisement that we see today. Latinos, over 4.8 million Latino businesses generate over $800 billion in revenue for this U.S. economy. Latinos contribute over $2.3 trillion annually to our GDP. And from a small and minority business owner perspective, Latinos are 2 to 3 times more likely to be denied business loans. On the general economic terms, Latinos also have less than 1/3 of the gross revenues that non-Hispanic firms do, generally under $1.2, $1.3 million. And at the same time, we see that unemployment, as it continues to creep up, past 26 million people. Estimates are that as many as 25% are actually Latinos. This impact also affects the median household wealth for Latinos, and we expect a significant drop. We've seen it from the last session, a decline of upwards of 66%. And also at Stanford program, we also can report that Latino businesses were actually the fastest driver to our economy. Latino businesses grew over 34% over the last 10 years, outpacing all other businesses. For this program, we're prioritizing 5 key pieces: economic relief to entrepreneurs who are already in line and have completed their applications, prioritizing economic relief and resources for small businesses with less than 20 employees, to prohibit discrimination against small employers in the PPP program, and to eliminate these typical financial institutional practices of big customers coming first. And in regards to the economic injury loans, that they should be based on operating expenses and not the number of employees, and then creating a special public-private partnership of $50 million as a safety net for Latino and minority businesses that get cut out of the EIDL and also the PPP program. So as we take a look at the data, as part of the last stimulus package, over $342 billion was actually distributed to over 1.6 million companies. There were over almost 5,000 lenders that were a part of this program. We then take a look at the distribution of those funds. So the top 1.5% of those companies, 25,000 companies, ended up receiving $95 billion. So 1.5% of the top companies that received PPP funding received $95 billion, averaging $3.6 million per company. The top 4% ended up taking literally over 60% of the funds, over $152 billion, and averaging about $2.2 million. When you keep in mind that most Latino businesses are actually under $1.2, $1.3 million, it's significant the impact that these large companies, in some cases even larger than 500 employees, are able to benefit from the PPP program. So as part of this Save Latino Businesses, we analyzed from Latino businesses that actually had applied in the PPP program, who had applied and who had actually received funds. So what we found, first and foremost, was that over 30%, 35%, 36% of Latino businesses did not even apply for the program. They didn't apply either because they were not aware, they didn't know how to apply, or the application process was actually cumbersome in and of itself. So only 63% of the Latino businesses that actually participated in the survey went through the full application process. Now, as for those businesses that actually did apply, right, only 29% received funds, meaning over 70% of the Latino businesses that did apply received nothing, no funding at all whatsoever. And then as we begin to drill down further, we take a look at it in regards to the type of entities, Latino businesses, that had actually applied. Corporations were the most likely entities to apply, as were limited liability partnerships, and also nonprofit organizations. The key piece for us as we took a look at this data was who was actually receiving these funds. And so what we find here is that over 63% of these organizations that had actually applied had made it through the application process, but less than 97 of them actually received any funding. The interesting piece here is that 75% of nonprofits received no funding whatsoever, none at all, for nonprofit organizations. For business entities that classified themselves as other, which is primarily sole proprietorships, over 78% of those businesses did not receive any funds at all. And so that's one big question that we've had. People have said, we've applied as a sole proprietorship, we didn't receive any funding, and we don't understand why. The top funders, or the top banks where Latino businesses applied, were Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Frost Bank, and PNC Bank, right? Bank of America only approved 12% of the applications and the PPP funding through their program. Over 88% of Latino businesses that apply through Bank of America have not received any funds. The same thing is actually for JP Morgan Chase, but with Wells Fargo, there were no Latino businesses that participated in our survey that actually received any funds whatsoever. 100% of those Latino businesses that applied received absolutely nothing. Frost Bank, which is actually a local regional bank, actually had over 60% of its applications processed and funded as well. They performed better than all the other banks. And PNC actually only approved 14% of the applications as they came through. So we see big disparities in the banks and how they're actually managing this process. That's a larger conversation, but our hope is that with this information now available, that they'll do a better job of allocating funds moving forward.
Thank you, Juan. Now, we have two witnesses, and I know that CEO Cindy Benavides has to leave in a moment. I would like to please, for the benefit of Spanish language media, if you could make a brief statement, Ms. Benavides, as to what you see in today's report.
Claro que sí. Muchísimas gracias, David, por esto y por todo lo que estamos haciendo, obviamente, a Ramiro, que dirige nuestra organización de USHCC con nuestros negocios. Y obviamente para nosotros lo que estamos mirando es que desafortunadamente está aumentando la disparidad del acceso al capital financiero para nuestros negocios pequeños en nuestra comunidad. Y lo que esto nos indica es que hay una gran falta de una campaña de educación y también de información que pueda alcanzar a nuestra comunidad. Nosotros hemos visto directamente de nuestros miembros que muchos de ellos desafortunadamente no tienen pues una relación con un banco, como lo indicó Ramiro, pero también que tal vez si lo tienen una cuenta personal y no una cuenta de negocio. Y cuando nosotros miramos a los reglamentos que ha puesto SBA, esto deja atrás a muchos de nuestros negocios pequeños. Sé que el presidente García también va a hablar en español después. Quiero asegurarme que Carolina y que Alicia tengan el tiempo para platicar, y muchísimas gracias otra vez a todos los medios por reunirse con nosotros. Gracias.
And thank you for being with us, CEO Benavides, if you have to go. Let me introduce the two witnesses before we come back to President Garcia. We have with us Ms. Alicia Ponce and Ms. Carolina also Sanchez Crozier. I'm going to begin with Alicia Ponce. She is the LULAC National Business Chair, and she is also the founder and principal of AB Monarch, an architectural firm. Ms. Ponce, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm the founder and principal of AP Monarch Architects. I wanted to thank all of you for such a swift action on everything that you're doing, from data analysis to just putting us all together. And I know that you were asking me about my personal application process. So for us, we're lucky enough to have that our accountant, who's also a small business, Latino business, she has kept us informed since day one. She had us prepare all of the paperwork that we were to expect. Our bank is Fifth Third, and they did not make their application available online until the 9th of April. So by that time, all of the other banks that were mentioned earlier, they were already receiving applications and even awarding, if I understand this correctly. So the first round of applications for us, it was over the phone. It was with somebody that I have a relationship with. And after that application, the phone application process, I didn't hear anything back until it was on the news. All funds are out, and that was it. And then the next rounds of applications was on April, when was it? On April 20th. And that was a PDF application. We submitted it, and we actually have heard some news. Fifth Third made it online for us right away when we heard that the second round of funds were to be released. And so, you know, it's been a very little communication. They have shared with us that the rules change on a day-to-day basis, and they are trying to keep us as informed as much as they can. But it's highly frustrating, you know, not to know anything.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ponce. I'd like to now introduce our second witness. She is Carolina Sanchez Crozier. She is the LULAC, Illinois, and National Education Chair, and also a consultant in her own right. Please, adelante, por favor, Ms. Crozier.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be a longstanding member of LULAC for 30-some years and to be an advocate like all of you here. And I want to thank you for all the effort. In my double hat that I wear, I am an immigrant entrepreneur that started my business 32 years ago with CSC Consulting Group, an IT company. And, you know, because of the schools being closed and having been primarily our business, we are on hold for most of our 80% or more of our businesses on hold. We have 20 employees, and you know, they're in jeopardy. So we were doing the due diligence to apply and to be ready. Unfortunately, our bank was Citibank. They were not ready. They were the last to be ready to be set up online. And while we were hearing everybody applying and getting online, our bank was not. And we finally got set up, or they were set up, informed us. We immediately responded within the day. And by then we already heard the news that the monies were run dry. And a few days later, we heard the news from Citibank in an email saying the application is going to be in a queue and we'll hold it for 30 days. Well, it doesn't make us feel any better. The funds are still gone. And after all the news we hear about the big business getting all the dollars and the prioritization of them, we are very hopeful, but we don't think, we're not very optimistic. So we hope that this movement will call to action, that the banks will do the right thing, and as the businesses like ours and many others are supporting them as customers, that they support us in the right way and not have these type of priority where only the big banks, the big customers get their funds. So we are equally frustrated and worried that we may not get the funds before they run out.
Carolina Sanchez Crozier, thank you so very much. I want to open it now for members of the media who may be on, who may have a question. Mr. Trasmonte, who is our IT expert in DC, will be controlling the flow of questions, and he will flag us. But does anyone have a question that they would like to ask of any of the panelists? Well, let me get it started. I do want to ask one, and then you can interrupt me, Jorge, if you do have an attendee who has a question. President Garcia, well, we have one here from Paul. Paul, you have a question that you'd like to ask? Go ahead, please. Your mic is open.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, so how big was the survey data set that you were using, and how much of, is this only your data from the survey, or was there any Small Business Administration data provided on this?
Paul, this is Juan Proaño here. How are you? So the survey actually was conducted in partnership between LULAC, the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and LBAN, the Latino Business Action Network. So it went out to all of the members of all of these organizations, if you will, over 50,000 folks. We had a bit over 800 responses, actually data still coming in. But once we normalized the data, we were at about 550 companies that we could tell had gone through the entire process, had applied, and were able to provide us the details relative to that application. That's all. But we'll be keeping it open to keep track of progress and how things are moving forward, and be able to report intermittently as part of this next round of stimulus too.
Paul, a follow-up to that? Do you have a question beyond that?
I guess the only other question I would have is, I mean, do you guys feel like this next round of funding, which allegedly had $60 billion set aside for the smallest businesses, only 30 of which was divvied up for banks with less than $10 billion in assets, and I'm just wondering how you feel about that passing. It did pass despite some of your guys' reservations and other advocates for Latino business owners reservations. Did any fixes happen that would have accommodated your concerns?
President Garcia or Ramiro, would you like to take that?
Let me just briefly respond. We had specifically asked, and there was a letter that came from myself and the National Hispanic Chamber asking that $50 billion be set aside for minority-owned businesses to make sure that the money flowed to those small disadvantaged businesses. The Senate, by appropriating $50 billion for small banks and credit unions, did not resolve that problem. We are concerned that what we saw in the last stimulus will repeat itself, and that's why we are showing the numbers. And basically, for example, Wells Fargo getting not one loan out to a Latino member of either LULAC or the National Hispanic, that's an F. That's a flunking grade. And they've been sued many times for discrimination against African-American and Latino communities. And we saw that now also with some of the other major banks that are in the study. And the only way you can resolve this is through the rules and regulations of the SBA and through Congress.
President Cavazos.
I just wanted to add that the way we're tracking the size of the loan amounts that are being reviewed and approved, and it's been broken out by state very, very well. The data should also track those loans that are being made to Latinos and Latinas, African American, Asian businesses. The data should track when the loans are made, not just what state they're with and the size, but it should also state the ethnic background of the members of the community those loans are going to. I agree that the dollars should be directed more toward communities that historically have been excluded from these types of lending opportunities. And so this is really a challenge for us. We know that the rules of the game were being written as the Paycheck Protection Program was approved. And even in many instances, the banks themselves did not have the criteria for the loan documents that they were being asked to put together. So, and many of our small businesses don't have an accountant or an attorney to go with them and help them have all of the armament that they need to apply for these loans and do it quickly. So clearly the folks that were more prepared and had greater access to resources and were larger in size were the first ones in. And unfortunately, many of the smaller businesses that really needed the liquidity who were less prepared just because they were smaller, fragile businesses, many of them family run, many of them Latino and businesses owned by people of color. Those businesses are the ones in line right now that are waiting to get this liquidity. So I agree with President Garcia that we need at the very least $50 to $60 billion directed at the Latino and Latina community, because without the data, there's no way of proving that this liquidity is going into the hands of our small Latino and Latina owned businesses right now. There's nothing on the data, Paul, that shows that Latinos and Latinas are getting their fair share of these loans. All we can track is by state and the dollar amounts.
Thank you, Mr. Cavazos. Chairperson Crozier, if I may ask, you are the National Education Chair. How much of this would you attribute to lack of information in Spanish also, or content that was accessible to the Spanish-speaking business community?
Well, I definitely think that our business community serves is in the Latino community with Spanish speaking. So themselves, grocery stores and other owners, really need to be catered to with their language. And I think that I didn't see that kind of outreach in Spanish to ensure that all information and all the supports to apply and to know where to apply, how to apply, will be made available to the business owners that are there, ready and supporting many times. The people that are there in the front lines, they don't have the access, the accountants and the resources. Yes, they do need that kind of support, and it was missing, and we need to advocate for them.
Thank you. And Ms. Ponce, you're a business owner. You commented you had tried to do everything you could do. Was it a relationship issue with the bank, you think? Or is it more of the bank not having a relationship with the federal government? Where do you lay some of that responsibility?
I think it's just the uncertainty of, I really think that Fifth Third was trying their best to give us the information. One of the reasons why I think that is because they did take a while to, put their information online. And during that time, we were communicating and they were saying, it just changes every day. We want to make sure that what we put out there is correct. And even this morning, I was on a webinar with the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and somebody was on the call, on the webinar, who did receive PPP money, but now that she has it, the guidelines are uncertain. She doesn't really know. It's the unclarity. So if I'm unclear that I have an accountant that helps me, I can't imagine, if this information is not available in Spanish for the small businesses too. I mean, it's really so disappointing.
Will you continue to try, or do you feel like it's a waste of your time?
No, I think it's worth to continue to try. I tell everybody, just keep trying, because that's what's in our entrepreneurial spirit, right? To keep trying. We can't stop now.
And I'd like to add to that, as Juan said earlier, and I also suggest for everybody to do, is apply as many places as you can, because it is being left to the banks and how they're prioritizing and people that are on queue. So we have 3 different applications submitted, and we'll see which one can go through first. So there's just no way of knowing, and that's the frustration, is what is the process, and is it fair, and is it equitable, which we haven't seen it on the first round, and we're really worried that it will be on the second round.
Thank you, Ms. Crozier. I will defer to any member of the media who wishes to ask a question. Please identify your news organization and your question. And as you do, I'd like to turn to President Cavazos. I apologize that President Garcia was called away and he had to step away from the camera. President Cavazos, I saw the letter that you wrote to Congress and to the administration, and you laid out some requests. Do you feel like they even read the letter, paid attention? Do you think that there were too many other interests at play? Why is it that the largest business advocacy organization didn't get that heard the way you would have liked?
Well, I believe, Mr. Cruz, that with the COVID crisis hitting everyone at the same time, that they're, you know, I said this last week, they're flying the plane and building it at the same time. So the bankers, as Ms. Ponce said, they don't know what type of criteria they need for the loan documents that they're writing up for these small business owners. Many of them Latino. The small business owners themselves have different levels of strength and capability in the records that they can bring to the table to apply for the loan. And then at the same time, the rules of the game, there was even some, you know, this location between the U.S. Department of Treasury and the Small Business Administration with the actual application form itself. And meanwhile, you know, you've got the political leadership, the Congress and the Senate and the executive branch trying to determine where the dollar should go and how much that should be. So to answer your question, we feel that we have shared solutions, not just ourselves, but also in partnership with LULAC. I do believe that they're reading what we are sharing, because we're not sharing complaints, we're sharing solutions for them in a way to approach providing more liquidity to Latino and Latino-owned businesses. I'm happy that there's at least 30 to 60 billion that's going to community banks, community development finance institutions, and small business investment corporations, and to credit unions. But like President Garcia said, it's not the solution. What we do know is that they are listening to our concerns that minority and Latino-owned businesses and Latino-owned businesses have not received their fair share of the lending. It's very clear through the data. What we just are asking for is that everyone focus on helping the smallest businesses, those that are 50 employees and below, and make sure that we save those businesses, because those businesses only have about 30 days of liquidity, and we're already in our 6th week, Mr. Cruz. So for us, the goal of this program was well-intentioned, the vision to keep our people employed through the Paycheck Protection Program. However, its execution has been very flawed.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I would like to give Juan Proaño, you're the analyst, as you continue to digest the data. How do you see the outlook for the future? You're looking strictly at data. You're not looking at political alignment. How do you see, and what you've heard today from 2 entrepreneurs, these women, how does that strike you?
Well, Ramiro said something, you know, very striking, which was that there were already 1.7 million Latino businesses or applications in the queue at PPP. So if we take a look at the numbers, $342 billion was distributed in 13 days. $301 billion will be distributed in less than 10 days, if you will. And if you haven't applied yet, you're likely not going to get any funding. And so that is going to be a significant factor. Now, what we have seen from a data perspective is that the big banks are the ones that are not processing the loans, right? And they're not processing loans for Latinos. Well, we see much more success at a local and regional level. Frost Bank, for example, did a tremendous job. 60% is significant in comparison to what Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, or Wells Fargo did. And the other thing that we've seen is that there are actually new entrants, which would be atypical lenders like PayPal, for example, in Quicken Loan. I've seen one case at least of a Latina business woman who applied at PayPal and received her funding within 7 hours. She applied that day and the funding was actually in her bank account by the end of the day. That's absolutely incredible. My company applied for PPP on the 2nd day because Bank of America would not allow us to apply because we didn't have an existing line of credit with them or an existing loan with them. And so that was a challenge for us. So we're also in the queue for EIDL and also PPP. And my hope is that, you know, the SBA and the banks will do a better job moving forward and that they'll address the needs of the Latino community.
Thank you. Juan Proaño in Florida, he is the president and CEO of Latino Strategies, who did the data analysis and the survey. We thank you for your service. We've also heard from Carolina Sanchez Crozier. She is the National Education Chair, longtime member of LULAC. Alicia Ponce, an entrepreneur and business owner, founder of APM Monarch Architectural, and our esteemed colleague here, El Presidente and CEO of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I apologize again that both CEO Benavides and President Garcia had to leave. De parte de nuestra organización, quiero decirles que la lucha de LULAC ha sido por más de 90 años. Esto nos ha frustrado, pero no nos vamos a desanimar. Ustedes han escuchado que perseverar es lo más importante y vamos a continuar haciendo el esfuerzo. Pero sí creemos que necesitamos más información relevante, precisa y a la hora indicada. Y a los políticos, pues esto debe ser un asunto que ayude a todos en este país que son dueños de las pequeñas empresas. Entonces, vamos a seguir corriendo la voz, vamos a seguir trabajando y luchando, y queremos que la gente en Washington sepa que aquí estamos y no nos vamos. Thank you one and all, and to the members of the media, we thank you. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to follow up with LULAC and with SKDK. We thank them for arranging this, and our esteemed Jorge Trasmonte, who is in Washington, D.C. My name is David Cruz in Los Angeles. I thank you all, and I wish you a wonderful afternoon. Muy buenas tardes.
Thank you, David.